So in brutal DMing, I would call this a failless game.
I don't know about failless. I've run a lot of Cthulhu, and believe me, there are a lot of worse things than just getting a piece of information easy from your GM. But having watched the whole video, I have some thoughts, and that means I have to come on here and we have to talk about it. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to preface this. I am seeing this two different ways because the dynamic, the expectations, the answer to this really is going to differ whether we're talking about one shots or we're talking about campaign. What is that big key difference? Time. And time is going to make all the difference in how I'm going to approach this. So let's start with one shots. Okay, because one shots are very, very different than campaigns. Why? Because time is extremely limited. And especially if you are running as a GM any kind of pre-written scenario, more than likely you have had to go through, pull out key pieces of information, key scenes, key locations, and you're going to have to stick with those because if you're lucky, you might have 3 or 4 hours to be able to run players you have never met before through this scenario. Even if you're writing it yourself, you still have to kind of crunch it down to fit within that time frame. With players, you don't know what their play style is, and they don't know what your play style is. So it's going to make it a lot harder. In those particular cases, I absolutely disagree with the whole idea of just give them information where you can. It doesn't matter if it actually is what it as written, because you have so little time. Sometimes it's just a matter of keeping the flow going. Players need to keep doing things. They need to keep working their way through. Now, that doesn't mean you railroad them. It just means that be a lot more flexible as a GM in terms of how you're getting those key pieces of information. Because they're going to go into, say, a town, and they're going to want to look through everything unless they just kind of want to walk through and they don't really care what's going on. They're either going to be very engaged or they're really not going to be engaged much whatsoever. It's kind of hard to find somewhere in between with most groups I've noticed at conventions. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, just saying I haven't seen it. So, if they happen to get to the library versus going to this one person's house under their bed where the locked box is that has that one little key piece of information, an item or whatever it is that they need to make sure they get to the end of the scenario. Well, then let them find it in the top shelf of a dusty bookcase somewhere in the back of a library, long forgotten, kind of Indiana Jones-esque. It's really not going to hurt anything, and it's going to help keep the players engaged, and it's going to help move them along, because when you only have, realistically, a few short hours, flow and pacing is extremely important. So just give them the damn information. Now, let's move on to campaigns because, again, campaigns have a beautiful, beautiful thing called time. And time is what makes all the difference. Because when you have time to slow down, when you have time to really explore things, ask questions, talk to people, go from town to town, try different things as players, you have a lot more flexibility, both as players and as GMs, to work within whatever's going on in that game session. You have time to build up and develop both in-game suspense, interest, engagement, and out of game. You as a GM and you and your players have time to build your dynamic as a team because, as I always say, GMs and players work together as a team to tell whatever the story is, even if it's nothing more than leaving a trail of bodies because you're murder hoboing your way all the way through the landscape and going from tavern to tavern to do what you do whenever you do in taverns. You know what I'm saying? So that's all different. You have time, and time allows a slower pace to build up anything that you want to. You have time to take an entire game session and do nothing but shop in the city. You have time to explore every nook and cranny in this very kind of suspicious town that you happen to be in. You have time as a GM to allow your players the freedom and the agency to go and look everywhere but the one place you want them to. But that said, there's still a caveat to all that, at least in my book. The caveat is that after a while, if they are exploring every single nook and cranny except the one little guy's hut that happens to have his little bed, that has this tiny little lockbox underneath, that has that one key piece of information or that object that they need, and they are doing everything but, and they are about to move on, it could be really boring searching through everything and finding nothing. And I know as a player that if I'm going through, especially multiple game sessions, exploring and talking to people and talking with my teammates, my fellow party members, and we are just not coming up with anything. And you as a GM are not giving us anything further and expecting us to figure it out, that's going to be not just boring, it's going to get frustrating. And when it gets frustrating, that's when it's like the engagement stops. And that is the last thing you want from your players. One of our responsibilities as a GM is to help keep our players engaged. Now, players, you also have a responsibility to stay engaged, to work with the GM. If the GM is not giving you what you need, you work with them. But if you really have exhausted pretty much everything that you can think of offhand, maybe it's either time to have a conversation with your GM. Or GMs, you got to read the room. Come on. If your players are really starting to kind of disengage because they're just getting frustrated, they can't figure out what to do next, you've got to give them something. Do you need to give them that information, that key piece, just kind of hand it to them? Absolutely not. But you need to provide enough information and or a challenge, something that will lead them to where you want them to go. There comes a point, I wouldn't call it railroading, but there definitely comes a point where it just, when things peter out, you got to change up the plan. So there really is a difference between handing them something just on a silver platter, basically right from the get-go, and making them work for it. Make them work for it, but you got to reward them for that hard work. And sometimes that means changing up your game plan and giving them that information, even if it's not in the same place as it was written. There's nothing wrong with that. The whole idea is to get together and have fun. Have a great time, enjoy what you're doing. And when it becomes work, real work, then it's no longer fun because we play games to get away from reality. We really don't need to run towards it, generally. And when you have time, when you play multiple sessions over and over with the same people, GM or player, you develop a dynamic. You develop expectations, whether spoken or unspoken. Spoken would generally be session 0. You lay out your expectations as a GM and as a player. You discuss things, you find compromises, you make up home rule, whatever is going to work best for your group. But during gameplay, certain expectations are. So we as GMs train our players to expect when we're going to give those crucial pieces of information or have those crucial scenes pop up. Players, you also set up expectations. The GM needs to kind of get the feel for it. Are you going to work together as a group, or are you just going to breeze through and expect the GM to give you everything? So when you have time in a campaign, those expectations build up. And sometimes later down the road, when things kind of go a little kaflooey, sometimes you got to sit down and talk about it. But overall, both players and GMs, tailor your game experience to what works best for you. Don't be afraid to talk to each other. Especially players, talk to each other, use what's on your character sheet. It's all there for a reason. Come up with ideas, work a little bit for it, and the GM should be rewarding you for it. Overall, everyone should be walking away with, hey, that was an awesome experience, because that really, in the end, is all that matters.